Construa o futuro do seu município trilhando as
Secretário-Geral, nós vamos entrar na parte de debates do capítulo 8.
Mr. Secretary-General of the United Nations, honorable ministers, distinguished delegates, and all stakeholders here present. Good morning. It is my honor and privilege as President of the United Nations General Assembly to welcome you to this hall for the opening of the general debate of the 78th session. Allow me to acknowledge in our midst today several presidents, former presidents of the General Assembly, including His Excellency Han Sang-soo, former Prime Minister of Korea, who served as President of the 56th session of the Assembly, and who now sits as Chair of the UN Council of Former Presidents of the General Assembly. Together, this Assembly Hall and this rostrum to multilateralism stand as a living to the extraordinary role and compelling influence and to the extraordinary role and compelling influence 75 years of the United Nations over the 75 years of its truly global platform. It is a unique and a truly global platform and problem solving for debate through multilateral dialogue diplomacy and problem solving. This year our imperative is clear. To unite the nations. Our imperative is clear. To be united in conviction of common purpose. To be united in solidarity of common joint action. And in solidarity of joint action. Such a common coordinated approach is needed now. Such a common coordinated approach at any point in our history. As much as at any climate change in our history. Debt, energy and food crisis, climate change, poverty and famine, energy and food crises. These crises are directly impacting the lives and well-being of billions of people around the lives and well-being of billions of decades of hard-won development gains. They are rolling back decades of hard-won development gains and thus condemning millions to lifelong intergenerational poverty. It is at times like hardship that we must It is at times like these to find our better selves, search deep within, and our common humanity to find our better selves that impels us, and our common humanity that impels us. I therefore implore you, the moment. Let us use this forum. I therefore implore for that which it was intended. Let us use this forum. Let us listen for that which it was intended. Let us rebuild trust. Let us listen and learn and reignite global solidarity. Let us rebuild trust. And let us find common ground solidarity to address the challenges. And let us find common ground to address the words of the late great Madeleine Albright. If the words of the late great Madeleine Albright, we would have to invent it. If the UN did not exist, we are fortunate therefore we would have to invent it. That it does indeed. We are fortunate therefore. Let us therefore make full and effective use of this unparalleled resource. Full and effective use, excellencies, of this unparalleled resource. This message is all the more important, excellencies, in light of the continued violation of the territorial integrity, in light of the continued violation of the territorial integrity of the United Nations and sovereignty, Ukraine, of a fellow member of the United Nations. That horrendous war has unleashed untold suffering and destroyed countless families, communities, and lives. Its cascading impacts has also spooked many developing countries in far-flung corners of the globe, unleashing acute shortages of essential commodities, triggering food insecurity and volatility
e foros internacionais
in energy prices.
Que estão preocupados
em regular os grandes temas globais. Tá?
Dois grandes temas internacionais, um é a política internacional, a questão da paz e da segurança internacionais, e aí, evidentemente, o principal foro é a ONU. E no que respeita à economia internacional, a gente poderia falar do Banco Mundial e do Fundo Monetário Internacional. A governança global baseada nessas instituições e em algumas outras, de 1945. De 1945. Então ela já tem bastante tempo, né? Então ela já tem bastante tempo, básica da reforma da governança global é você atualizar essas instituições internacionais para um mundo que está em transformação. Então, por exemplo, após o fim da Guerra Fria, essa ideia da reforma da Guerra Fria, essa ideia da reforma porque o mundo mudou bastante a partir dos anos 90. E o Brasil, especialmente, tem muito interesse nisso, e a ideia básica brasileira e de outros países, durante os primeiros governos do presidente Lula, você já teve reforma no FMI, por exemplo. Em desenvolvimento. É um fundo, né? Durante os primeiros governos do presidente Lula, você já teve reforma no FMI, investimento de vários países. É um fundo, o próprio Brasil mesmo aumentou sua cota parte. Você tem cotas parte. Agora, a questão da ONU, investimento de vários países, de segurança da ONU, essa reforma ela é muito difícil de acontecer. Não há perspectiva, porque você tem 5 países com veto ali no Conselho de Segurança e muito dificilmente eles vão abrir mão desse privilégio. Mas o Brasil continua reiterando isso. Há 20 anos o presidente Lula falou.
A gente viu, né, que há 20 anos ele já pedia isso.
E agora, novamente.
Tá certo. Vamos agora, então, ao Viva Nova York. Vamos voltar a conversar com a repórter Luana Karen. Luana, conta pra gente as novidades daí. Bom dia novamente.
Oi, Renata. Bom dia novamente. Bom dia para todos aí novamente. Pois é. Olha, estão no plenário da ONU neste momento para assistir o discurso que o presidente Lula fará logo mais. O presidente da Câmara dos Deputados, Arthur Lira, e do Senado Federal, Rodrigo Pacheco. Também estão presentes vários ministros de Estado que integram a comitiva do presidente Lula, entre eles a ministra do Meio Ambiente, Marina Silva, a ministra dos Povos Indígenas, Sônia Guajajara, a ministra de Gestão, Esther Dweck, o ministro da Secretaria de Comunicação Social da Presidência, Paulo Pimenta. Também estão aqui em Nova York a ministra da Saúde, Nízia Trindade, e o ministro da Fazenda, Fernando Haddad, entre outros. Bom, e entre os chefes de Estado que estão neste momento no plenário da ONU acompanhando os discursos, chama a atenção a presença do presidente da Ucrânia, Volodymyr Zelensky. Nesta quarta-feira, o presidente Lula tem um encontro com Zelensky, claro, para tratar da guerra entre Rússia e Ucrânia. Também faz parte da agenda do presidente Lula, além do discurso que fará logo mais aqui na Assembleia da ONU, mais 4 reuniões bilaterais hoje à tarde com os presidentes da Palestina e da Áustria e os primeiros ministros da Noruega e da Alemanha. E amanhã, Renata, além desse encontro com o Zelensky, que é muito aguardado, também há um encontro do presidente Lula com o presidente norte-americano Joe
Biden. During high-level week. It naturally interlinks with the General Assembly's high-level dialogue on financing for development, which is key to accelerating the financing impetus for the SDGs. The preparatory ministerial meeting for the Summit of the Future will help to launch the negotiations of the Pact of the Future, giving guidance on how to ensure that the United Nations is fit for purpose in the 21st century. It will give member states the opportunity to come together and to transform our shared future. We will also see 3 health-related high-level meetings on pandemic prevention, preparedness and response, universal health coverage, and on tuberculosis, all of which offer us opportunities to better the lives of our global citizens. And the Secretary General's Climate Action Summit offers a moment to build political ambition ahead of COP28 in November. Tomorrow, I will also join hands with several heads of state and government to convene a breakfast summit to address the existential threats posed by sea level rise, an issue of significant concern to small island developing states, especially those in the Pacific region. Excellencies, allow me to pause here and to reiterate my deepest condolences to the governments and people of Morocco and Libya. The twin disasters of earthquakes and flooding have left thousands dead and untold more suffering. It is my sincere hope that resources and relief can be expedited to support all those who now find themselves in desperate need. As a citizen of a climate-vulnerable region, I urge member states to recognize the continued and escalating impacts of climate change and to deliver real transformative results. Let us work together to unlock the finances and resources required to support those most vulnerable in mitigation, adaptation, and resilience building. And let us continue to work on the multidimensional vulnerability index with the aim of moving beyond GDP to a measure of economic development that effectively captures a country's true vulnerability to external shocks. Excellencies, beyond the high-level week, this year we will commemorate the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. This is an opportunity to rededicate ourselves to the principles enshrined in the Declaration and to remind ourselves that we are all born free and equal in dignity and in rights. As President of the 78th session, I am committed to championing vulnerable and marginalized groups, including indigenous peoples, peoples living with disabilities, and older persons. I have committed to ensure that we do not continue to neglect countries in special situations, and I intend to soon launch the high-level advisory group on LDCs, LLDCs, and SIDS. But first and foremost, we need to work for all women and girls who are appallingly still struggling for equality and respect. We must walk the talk on gender equality and women's empowerment. This means according women full, equal, and meaningful participation at every level. As an international gender champion myself, I'm strongly committed to promoting gender equality and women's empowerment. And I have appointed a special envoy and special advisor on gender equality and women's empowerment to assist me in this endeavor. Before I close, allow me to emphasize this. Despite the many and complex challenges we face, we do have the capacity to effect change, consequential change. We can make a meaningful difference to the lives of billions of people, if we so choose. We do not lack capacity. What we lack is the will to act. By putting aside our differences and bridging divides, we can deliver, we must deliver peace, progress, prosperity, and sustainability to everyone, everywhere. So let us step up and take action now. Let us re-energize the UN General Assembly and demonstrate our capacity and our will to deliver for all. In the words of Stephen Pressfield, an author born in Trinidad and Tobago, the most pernicious aspect of procrastination is that it can become a habit. We don't just put off our lives today, we put them off till our deathbed. Never forget, this very moment we can change our lives. There never was a moment, and never will be, when we are without the power to alter our destiny. This second we can turn the tables on resistance. This second, we can sit down and do our work. Excellencies, I thank you once again for your support to me and my presidency, and I wish you fruitful, productive, and healthy debate in the coming days. I thank you. Before giving the floor to the first speaker for this morning, I would like to remind members that the list of speakers for the general debate has been established on the agreed basis that statements should be no longer than 15 minutes to enable all speakers to be heard at a given meeting. Within this time frame, I would like to appeal to speakers to deliver their statements at a reasonable pace so that interpretation into the other official UN languages may be provided properly. I would also like to draw your attention to the decision taken by the General Assembly at previous sessions, namely that the practice of expressing congratulations inside the General Assembly Hall after a speech has been delivered is strongly discouraged. After delivering their statements from the rostrum, speakers are invited to exit the General Assembly Hall through room GA 200, located behind the rostrum, before returning to their seats. May I take it that the General Assembly agrees to proceed in this manner? It is so decided. Finally, I should like to draw the attention of members that during the general debate, official photographs of all the speakers are taken by the Department of Global Communications. Members interested in obtaining these photographs are requested to contact the Photo Library of the United Nations. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Luiz Inácio Lula de Silva, President of the Federative Republic of Brazil. I request protocol to escort His Excellency. On behalf of the General Assembly, I have the honor to welcome His Excellency Luiz Inácio Lula de Silva, President of the Federative Republic of Brazil, and to invite him to address the Assembly.
My greetings to the President of the General Assembly, Ambassador Dennis Francis from Trinidad, Tobago. It's a great pleasure to be preceded by the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres. I greet each of the heads of state and government and delegates present. I pay homage to our compatriot Sergio Vieira de Mello and 21 other employees of this organization, victims of the brutal attack in Baghdad 20 years ago. I also wish to express my condolences to the victims of the earthquake in Morocco and the storms that hit Libya. Like what happened recently in the state of Rio Grande do Sul in my country, these tragedies have claimed lives and causing irreparable losses. Our thoughts and prayers are with all the victims and their families. Ladies and gentlemen, exactly 20 years ago, I stood on this rostrum for the first time and said, on that September 23rd, 2003, my first words before this World Parliament be of confidence in the human capacity to overcome challenges and evolve towards superior forms of coexistence. I return today to say that I maintain my unshakable trust in humanity At that time, the world had not yet realized the severity of the climate crisis. Today, it knocks on our doors, destroys our homes, our cities, our countries, kills and imposes losses and suffering on our brothers, especially the poorest. Hunger, the central theme of my speech at this World Parliament 20 years ago, today affects 735 this tonight without knowing if they'll have anything to eat tomorrow. The world is increasingly unequal. The 10 richest billionaires have more wealth than the poorest 40% of humanity. The destiny of every child born on this planet seems to be decided while they're still in their mother's womb. The part of the world where their parents live and the social class their family belongs to will determine whether or not that child will have opportunities throughout life. Whether they will eat at every meal or whether they will be denied the right to eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day. Whether they will have access to health care or whether they will fall to diseases that could have already been eradicated. Whether they will finish school and get a quality job or whether they will become part of the countless of unemployed, underemployed, and discouraged people. First of all, we must overcome resignation, which makes us accept such unfairness as a natural phenomenon. To overcome inequality, there's a lack of political will from those who govern the world in order to overcome inequality. Ladies and gentlemen, if today I return in the honorable capacity of President of Brazil, it is thanks to the victory won by democracy in my country. Democracy ensured that we overcame hate, misinformation, and oppression. Hope, once again, has won over fear. Our mission is to unite Brazil and rebuild a sovereign, fair, sustainable, supportive, with solidarity, generous, and a joyful country. Brazil is finding itself again with our region, with the world, and multilateralism. As I never tire of repeating, Brazil is back. Our country is back to make its due contributions in facing the major global Our country is back to make its due contribution in facing the major global challenges. We have reclaimed our foreign policy's universalism, marked by respectful dialogue with everyone. The international community is immersed in a whirlwind of multiple and simultaneous crises. The COVID-19 pandemic, the climate crisis, the food and energy insecurity have been amplified by growing geopolitical tensions. Racism, intolerance, xenophobia have spread, encouraged by new technologies created supposedly to bring us closer together. If we had to summarize these challenges in a single word, this challenge could be called, the reason for its challenge would be inequality. Inequality is at the root of this phenomena, or acts to aggravate them. The UN's broadest and most ambitious collective action aimed at development, the 2030 Agenda, could turn into its biggest failure. We have reached half of the implementation period and are still far from the defined goals. Most of the Sustainable Development Goals are moving at a slow pace. The moral and political imperative of eradicating poverty and ending hunger appears to have been numbed. In the 7 years that we have left, reducing inequalities within and between countries should become the core objective of the 2030 Agenda. Reducing inequalities within countries requires including the poor in government budgets and making the rich pay taxes that are proportional to their wealth. In Brazil, we are committed to implementing all the 17 SDGs in an integrated and indivisible manner. We want to achieve racial equality in Brazilian society through an 18th goal, which we will voluntarily adopt. We launched the Brazil Zero Hunger Plan, which will bring together a series of initiatives to reduce poverty and food insecurity. Amongst them is the Bolsa Família, the family stipend, which has become a global reference in income transfer programs for families that keep their children vaccinated and in school. Inspired by Brazilian Bertha Lutz, a pioneer as an advocate in gender equality in the UN Charter, we have passed a bill that makes equal pay between women and men mandatory when they perform the same role. We shall fight femicide and all forms of violence against women. We shall rigorously advocate for the rights of the LGBTQI+ groups and of people with disabilities. We have revived social participatory practices as a strategic tool for implementing public policies. Mr. President, acting against climate change involves thinking about tomorrow and facing historical inequalities. Rich countries grew based on a model with high rates of climate-damaging gas emissions. The climate emergency makes it urgent to correct course and implement what has already been agreed. There's no other reason why we speak of common but differentiated responsibilities. It is the vulnerable populations in the global south who are most affected by the loss and damage caused by climate change. The richest 10% of the world's population are responsible for almost half of all carbon released into the atmosphere. We, developing countries, do not want to repeat this model. In Brazil, we have already proven once and will prove again that a socially fair and environmentally sustainable model is possible. We are at the forefront of energy transition, and our matrix is already one of the cleanest in the world. 87% of our electrical power comes from clean and renewable sources. Solar, wind, biomass, ethanol, and biodiesel power generation is growing every year. The potential for generating green hydrogen is immense. With the Ecological Transformation Plan, we will invest in sustainable industrialization and sustainable infrastructure. We have resumed a sound and renewed Amazon agenda with oversight actions aimed at fighting environmental crimes. Over the last 8 months, deforestation in the Brazilian Amazon has already been reduced by 48%. The whole world has always talked about the Amazon. The whole world has always talked about the Amazon. Now, the Amazon is speaking for itself. A month ago, we hosted the Belém Summit meeting at the heart of the Amazon and launched a new collaboration agenda between countries that are part of that biome. There are 50 million South Americans living in the Amazon whose future depends on the decisive and coordination action of the countries that hold sovereignty over the region's territories. We all have also further dialogue with other countries that have tropical forests in Africa and Asia. We want to arrive at COP28 in Dubai with a joint vision that reflects, without any coaching, the priorities for preserving the Amazon, the Congo, and Borneo Mekong basins based on our needs. Without mobilizing financial and technological resources, there's no way to implement what we decided in the Paris Agreement and the Global Biodiversity Framework. The promise to allocate $100 billion annually to developing countries remains just that, a long promise. Today, this amount would be insufficient for a demand that already reaches trillions of dollars. Mr. President, the principle on which multilateralism is based, that of sovereign equality between nations, has been eroding. At the main global governance levels, negotiations in which all countries have a voice and vote have lost momentum. When institutions reproduce inequalities, they are part of the problem, not the solution. Last year, the IMF made available $160 billion in special drawing rights to European countries and just $34 billion to African countries. The unequal and distorted representation of the management of the IMF and the World Bank is unacceptable. We have not corrected the excesses of market deregulation and the support of the ideology of the minimum state. The foundations of a new economic governance have not been laid. The BRICS was the result of this paralysis and constitute a strategic platform to promote cooperation between emerging countries. The recent expansion of the group at the Johannesburg Summit meeting strengthens the fight for an order which accommodates the economic, geographic, and political plurality of the 21st century. We are a force that works towards fairer global trade in a context of a serious crisis in multilateralism. Rich countries' protectionism has gained strength, and the World Trade Organization remains paralyzed, especially its dispute settlement system. Nobody remembers the Doha Development Round anymore. In the meantime, unemployment and precarious work has been undermining people's confidence in better times, especially the youth. Governments need to break away from the increasing dissonance between the voice of the markets and the voice of the streets. Neoliberalism has aggravated the economic and political inequality that plagues democracies today. Its legacy is a mass of disenfranchised and excluded people. Amidst the wreck, far-right adventures emerge who deny politics and sell solutions that are easy as they are wrong. Many have fallen to the temptation of replacing failed neoliberalism with primitive, conservative, and authoritarian nationalism. We repudiate an agenda that uses immigrants as scapegoats, undermines the welfare state, and attacks workers' rights. We need to reclaim the best humanist traditions which inspired the creation of the UN. No relevant economical, social, active inclusion policies at cultural, education, and digital levels are fundamental for promoting democratic values and defending the rule of law. Preserving press freedom is essential. A journalist like Julian Assange cannot be punished informing society in a transparent and legitimate way. Our fight is against misinformation and cybercrimes. Apps and platforms should not abolish the labor laws we fought so hard for. Upon taking over as the chair of the G20 next December, we will spare no effort to place the fight against inequality in all its dimensions at the core of the international agenda. Under the motto, Building a Just World and a Sustainable Planet, the Brazilian chair will coordinate social inclusion and fight against hunger, sustainable development, and reform of global governance institutions. Mr. President, there will be no sustainability or prosperity without peace. Armed conflicts are an offense to human rationality. We know the horrors and suffering produced by all wars. Promoting a culture of peace is a duty for all of us. Building it requires persistence and vigilance. It is disturbing to see that old unresolved disputes persist and new threats emerge or gain force. The difficulty of guaranteeing the creation of a state for the Palestinian people clearly shows this. Added to this case, the persevering humanitarian crisis in Haiti, the conflict in Yemen, threats to Libyan national unity, and institutional ruptures in Burkina Faso, Gabon, Guinea, Conakry, Mali, Niger, and Sudan. In Guatemala, there's a risk of a coup d'etat, which would prevent the winner of the democratic elections from taking office. The war in Ukraine exposes our collective inability to enforce the purposes and principles of the UN Charter. We do not underestimate the difficulties in achieving peace, but no solution will be lasting if it is not based on dialogue. I have reiterated that work needs to be done to create space for negotiations. A lot is invested in weapons and very little in development. Last year, military spending totaled over $2 trillion. Expenditures on nuclear weapons reached $83 billion, a value 20 times higher than the regular UN budget. Stability and security will not be achieved where there is social exclusion and inequality. The UN was born to be the home of understanding and dialogue. The international community must choose. On one hand, there is the expansion of conflicts, the furthering of inequalities, and the erosion of the rule of law. On the other, the renewing of multilateral institutions dedicated to promoting peace. Unilateral sanctions cause great harm to the population of affected countries. In addition to not achieving their alleged goals, they hinder the mediation and prevention processes and the peaceful resolution of conflicts. Brazil will continue to reject measures taken without support from the UN Charter, such as the economic and financial embargo imposed on Cuba and the attempt to classify this country as a state sponsor of terrorism. We shall continue to criticize any attempts to divide the world into zones of influence and reviving the Cold War. The UN Security Council has been progressively losing its credibility. This frailty is the specific result of actions from its permanent members who wage unauthorized wars aimed at territorial expansion or regime change. Its paralysis is the most eloquent proof of the urgent need to reform it, which will bring it greater representation and efficacy. Ladies and gentlemen, inequalities needs to inspire outrage over hunger, poverty, war, disrespect for human beings. Moved by the power of outrage, we may act willingly and unwavering in fighting inequality and effectively transforming the world around us. The UN needs to fulfill its role as a builder of a world with more solidarity, fraternity, and fairness. But it would only do so if its members have the courage to proclaim their discontent at inequality and work tirelessly to overcome it. And I will wish to say thank you very much to all of you.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Federative Republic of Brazil for the statement just made, and I request protocol to escort His Excellency.